everyone. I'm your host, Anika Zubair, and welcome back to the next episode of the Customer Success Pro podcast. I am a customer success executive leader, award-winning CS strategist, CS coach, and customer success fanatic. I help CS leaders and CSMs build and scale world-class CS processes and teams. I'm a strong believer that customer success is not a destination, but a journey. And it can be a tough journey, but don't worry, I'm here to help. This podcast was created to help make your CS journey a little bit easier to navigate. Join me every month on this podcast where we will dive into the hottest topics in CS, the newest strategies, and the best practices in customer success so you can make your CS journey a little bit easier. Make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcast so that you can continue to learn on this CS journey that we are on together. Welcome to the podcast. Today, I am speaking with Rachel Provan, who is a top 25 CS influencer and coach for customer success leaders. She has over 17 years of experience in customer success leadership building and scaling CS departments from startups to large corporations. With a passion for fusing psychology with business strategy and leadership techniques, Rachel teaches new CS leaders to build and scale revenue-generating customer success departments. Her flagship course, the CS Leadership Academy, helps former CSMs nail their transition to accomplished CS leaders. With all of Rachel's experience in studying psychology and working with CS leaders, today we are going to talk about mindset shifts and how, as a customer success pro, you can shift your ways of working from reactive to proactive. Let's talk to Rachel all about shifting your mindset into proactive ways of working. Welcome, Rachel, to the podcast. You are my very first guest on my new podcast, and I'm so honored and excited to have you here with us today. But before we get into today's topic, I would love to let our listeners know who you are, what it is you're up to, what is Provan Success, and what's your role there. Tell us a bit more about you.
Oh, my goodness. Well, first of all, thank you so much for letting me be your first guest. That really is such an honor. And I'm fully aware of that because I just started a podcast and I'm like trying to figure out my first guest. So totally get it. But yeah, I mean, I've been in customer success for 18 years now. I keep saying 17. I'm like, no, it's a new year. It's 18, Rach. And yeah, I've done everything from seed stage to Fortune 500 companies and everything in between. Everything but 2 years of that was in leadership and, just built CS departments and scaled them over and over, which does not mean I was good at it at the beginning, by the way. I got better over time.
With anyone? Is anyone good at CS when they start?
That's the thing. So I'd been in it so long, and after a while, I started realizing, one of my favorite things to do was lead my team and help them grow professionally. And I just kept churning out what I called like mini directors. I would create, managers of customer success and directors, and they would go on and they would even surpass me and go to like VP stuff. I did a VP job once, but I was like, I'm kind of good at like helping these people level up, helping them with their confidence, helping them learn what they need to know. And I mean, this took me forever to learn all this stuff, and they're like getting the short version, and I loved it. But at a certain point, I was just thinking to myself, it was really a struggle, leadership for me. And there was a lot of self-doubt, and I made a lot of mistakes that I didn't necessarily have to make if someone would have just told me. Like, a lot of these things were pretty straightforward if I just had a reference point. So I created Provan Success, which is customer success leadership coaching for customer success leaders in their first 5 years of leadership, mainly. I mean, I'll work with anyone, but that tends to be the majority of the people I work with. So I do a little bit of one-on-one, but these days I'm mostly doing a cohort-based coaching where they can learn online on videos and then get coached weekly by me with a community of fellow CS leaders that they also learn from. They learn as much from each other as they do from me. But I absolutely love it. We teach them not just the strategy of how to build and scale, but also the mindset stuff you need, the team leadership stuff you need, how to work with other departments so that you can actually get something done.
Which is so important and something that you don't learn in school. And it's not something that you can pick up just naturally. It is something that you
Exactly.
have to be guided, and something that someone else has gone through would then help you based on their experience. And again, experience can't be like taught in school. It's something that we have to learn on the job. And I'm guessing your courses get you there a lot faster through the experience that you've had.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, it's not just here's what I did, go do it. Here's what I learned. Here's my wisdom. I have them do kind of breakout rooms, and we do things like understanding the KPIs of other departments. We're going to take a few minutes and we're going to write down what those are and see how CS aligns with those. And like, you're going to come up with something you're going to talk to about those other interdepartment leaders about how CS can help their department without doing extra work. So they're given a chance to work on those things and think about those things before it smacks them in the face. Like, oh, I have all these great ideas, all these great plans, and no one's letting me do them.
Yeah. Yeah. So you went from being an executive leader, working in companies, startups, scale ups, big organizations, like you just said, and then you decided to go totally off script and decide to start your own business, which is a huge accomplishment, because I think a lot of people like the idea of, I want to be my own boss, I want to start working for myself, but that's no easy feat. And you've gone ahead and done it, and you've been doing it for a few years now under Provan Success. So huge congratulations on that. But you also have a team, a company. What are your ambitions with being a CEO of your own business now?
Yeah, it's so funny. It keeps evolving, because I say I never wanted to own a business, and yet I've had several. Like from when my first business was when I was 12, and it was like a legit catering business that I was doing like parties of 50. So I don't know where I come up with but I like stability, right? I like knowing where my next paycheck's going to come from.
Oh no. And where did entrepreneurship come from if you like stability?
And I can tell you in that sense, entrepreneurship, if I'm very honest, came from how the tech economy has been the past couple of years, where I had to say to myself, well, this isn't a predictable paycheck either. I was working in startups. They kept, closing, or I would, move from one to the next because it was like a toxic environment, and I was like, honestly, I'm moving around so much that this is not as steady a paycheck, and it's not as predictable as I'm really giving it credit for. And I don't really have that much control over what I do, whether I can be successful, because in certain situations, you're just not set up for success.
Yeah.
A lot of them, there are things you can do, and that's some of the things I teach, but and people can tell you in my course, there are some places where I'm just like, that's a non-starter. And I got to the point where it was like, I was working so hard. And I think this has been, a symptom of CS the last few years, where it's do everything but accomplish nothing.
Yeah. Oh man. I'm already I'm nodding along, feeling all the pain points that you're just describing, because as a CS leader, it's just, we're really in the thick of things these years.
Yeah. So I was thinking to myself, if I'm going to be killing myself with how much I'm working, I want to at least have it make sense and know that I think this is the right thing to be doing. I think this is the right direction. And if I'm wrong on my own terms. I'm not just telling people look, I'm showing you how this is not going to work. And then being like, no, do it anyway. And just like, okay. That just became too frustrating. But the thing is, I didn't even really, I fell into it. I do so many things. I fell into CS. But I was looking for a new position, but I was like, I'm going to be so picky this time. I know the red flags. I know what to watch for. And it was, 2021 when, hiring boom, or early 2022, people were still hiring like crazy. And I was like, I can be picky. I've got tons of experience. I've got an online presence. People are offering me jobs. And I found myself just saying nope, no, and I'm, getting these offers. I was like, eh. And it occurred to me, I was like, something is steering me in another direction. I keep doing this and I love being a CS leader, but I keep getting walloped and I keep getting opportunities to do it again. And I keep seeing these red flags and it's waving me in another direction. So I need to make some money right now. I'm going to offer to coach some people because, I'd done it for money once. Somebody messaged me on LinkedIn and was like, "Hey, do you do coaching?" And I was like, "Yes."
Oh, maybe.
Sure. What's your rates? Hold on, let me Google that. That would be $250 an hour back then. And so I did that once and it worked out really well. And I was like, all right, let's just see if people are into this, because I was like, well, I've got no money coming in, so I need to do something at all times. I cannot sit around and do nothing. So I bought a course. I'm a course junkie. Bought a course in how to like get your first clients. And, that was my first real investment in my own, development, career development. And it was like 3K. And I remember like truly almost throwing up as I was buying this with no income coming in. And like, I told my husband about it and I was like, he's going to kill me. This isn't going to work and he's going to kill me.
But you made a very solid investment by the sounds of it, 3K. And
I made it back in 2 months. Yeah, I made it back in 2 months. The course was 3 months. I made it back in 2. And that was something where I discovered like, oh, that's what they mean by an investment. I do get this back and more.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So that's when I started doing that kind of thing more often. And that's what made me comfortable asking for money, because initially like that gave me the icks and I was very uncomfortable. But when I realized like, look at what this did for me. Look at, if people give me money, I actually have the time to invest, to give them all my focus and give them what they need to then go out and make more, to succeed better, to not lose their goddamn minds.
Which I think we're going to dive in deeper in the topic around basically how the human psychology really affects customer success and how we can go from reactive to proactive customer success with a mindset shift, which I know you discuss in your course as well. It's one of the pieces of content that you discuss and you share on LinkedIn. And then I know that you discuss on your own podcast as well. But super curious, you mentioned you fell into customer success. I want to dive in deeper there. What inspired you then to actually work in customer success if you fell into it?
It's like, I guess now these days people are like, oh, I want to be in customer success. But like any of us who were, kind of early adopters,
yeah, the name wasn't around when I started in CS.
I mean, I was an actor and I mainly did like small independent films that went to like arty festivals, a little bit of TV, a little bit of plays. But I was tired of waitressing. I was like, I don't want to be smelly at the end of the day and tired and, grumpy. So I was like, maybe I can do an office job. I'll do some temp work. And I got assigned to this place that was at the time called Vintage Filings. And I was killing it at data entry. So they hired me and they just kept promoting me basically. And this place allowed me, they're like, look, we like your work so much, we'll allow you to like fly off, do a movie for a month and come back.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, like obviously they didn't pay me during that, but it's like, yeah, your job will be here. And then I was like, yes, please. So, and I even got to keep my health insurance. So I was going to be loyal to that. And then by like 27, 28, when, I was there a number of years, by like 27, 28, I was just like, I'd been acting for over a decade at that point, and it's just very demoralizing the way people talk to you about your body. I mean, at 100 pounds, I was asked to lose 10.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah. They're like, well, you're going to look fat next to her. I was like, uh-huh.
God, I thought modeling was bad, but acting sounds just as brutally bad too.
Bad. And you're just not treated like a human. And like at 27, 28, honestly, at least at that point as a woman, like if you haven't made it, yeah, you can still do stage, but you're not making any real money.
Yeah.
I was like, I want a little bit more of a normal, predictable life. I'm happy at this company. I have friends. I'm doing well. Like, let's just sink in here, see what happens. Like, maybe I'll go back to school and become a psychologist, right? Because I double majored in that. And I've been studying that longer than CS, even just like my whole life. But then I found out what you make as a psychologist. And I was like, but I'm making more than that now. And I'm like 27. And they're like, yeah. So, you could go to medical school, and then you could be a psychiatrist and make real money. And I was like, I faint at the sight of blood. I don't think that's going to work out for me. So I was just like, I guess I'm figuring it out here.
What a unique story.
I know, it's
I
weird.
love that. Like you were an actress that was also a waitress that studied psychology. And now you've come like full circle of like, I worked in tech. Well, you still work in tech,
Yeah,
I guess, technically, but
technically.
technically you still work in tech, but you have now leveraged a lot of your previous experience to now build these courses, coach people, and really speak about psychology in the day-to-day life of a CSM and how the effects of how our mind works really can shift the way you work day to day, which I know is something you cover in detail in your course as well with CSLA. But I think a lot of people who are listening to this podcast and who are working in customer success today are probably struggling with, I have a million things on my to-do list. My calendar just keeps running over. I have meeting after meeting, back-to-back calls. I just cannot seem to go from reactive and like just dealing with inbox fire and dumpster fires when it comes to clients to being truly proactive and being that consultative customer success manager that I think everyone is ideally, that's like the ideal role that everybody wants to be in. But we know we deal with dumpster fires every single day. So in your opinion, like with CS being so much in mindset and a lot of teams work in like support driven or reactive modes, what kind of mindset shift should a CSM or CS professional really focus on to move from that reactive state into that proactive approach that we hope to be in?
Great question. And, some of that is to do with, kind of what stage of maturity you're at in customer success. Like you're never going to move to fully proactive until you're using data and tools and you have your personas and your use cases. Like those are kind of the personas and use cases are table stakes. And then you move on to like data and tools. And that's where you start to get ahead of it because you're able to see trends. When everything is siloed all over the place, you can't possibly. And it is going to keep you reactive because it takes you forever to do anything to see one thing about a client. But in terms of, I always like to look at it as what can I do in my situation right now? What do I have control over? And I mainly work with leaders, but I have worked with CSMs as well. And I always like to say you can lead from wherever you are. It doesn't matter what your title is. You can choose like, all right, this is what needs to happen. I'm going to take control of this and do the right thing. And it doesn't mean you disregard everybody else. It means you learn to work with them. You do what's right for the collective is really, if you find something that works really great, you don't just keep it to yourself. You share it to the team. You help move everybody forward is really what leadership is about to me.
And how about for CS leaders then? Because you're working with CS leaders every day. What kind of mindset shift should they be focusing on
It's so different
to help their teams?
The CSMs have to be reactive to some degree because you're in the weeds, right? I do think there's a sense of urgency that isn't necessarily accurate, that isn't necessarily properly calibrated. People get so anxious and it's like, this customer's upset. Like, I'm sorry I interrupted you, but this customer's upset. It's like, that's not an emergency. Like no one is bleeding out on a table. We are in customer success.
No, but really, no one's dying here.
Exactly. Like there are situations where it's like, okay, no. And there are even situations in tech where it's like, okay, our product is down. Everyone's freaking out. It's like, yes, please interrupt me for that. But someone's upset. They'll still be upset in an hour when I finish what I need to do.
Exactly.
But that, again, that's something that is a top-down thing that you set that tone for your team. If your leader's like, oh my God, they're upset, what are you doing about it? Then of course you're going to be like that. And it's not productive for anyone. But what I suggest, my juicy tip that I give to everyone, whether it's a CS leader or a CSM, and whoever you are, you need to kind of clear this with whoever you're reporting to. I feel like you have to sort of ask permission less as a leader and have it be more like, so here's how I work. But I'm a big believer in setting aside 1 hour every day, put it on your calendar, mark it as a meeting, and attend it as you would a meeting every single day. Do not schedule over it unless you would cancel a meeting with someone for whatever's being asked of you. Turn off your Slack, turn off your email. It's 1 hour. No one's going to die. And again, let your boss know you're doing this. Have a way for them to reach you in an actual emergency. I like to say, put your phone on the other side of the room where you can't reach it with your hand. because we're addicted. We'll just,
Yeah, my phone is literally in front of me right now.
Yeah, exactly. Like I can't unless it's physically removed from me. So, and be like, look, call me if there's an emergency. I will walk across the room and pick it up, but otherwise I'm heads down. In that time, you should be working on strategy. By strategy, I mean, what are the big picture things? What are the projects I need to work on to move the needle forward? And I'm a big fan of having just one per quarter, that this is the project I have. Here are its stages. Every day I clock in at that time and I just heads down work on that one project. And that's how you move the needle forward every day and make measurable progress every day. Because if you just use that time to quote unquote catch up, you're not ever working on your own KPIs.
I totally agree, Rachel. By the way, I'm like nodding visually because I think that, yes, I'm a big believer in time blocking, but also you can't just say focus time or
Right.
busy or anything like that, because you're not going to be held accountable to that. And by you, I mean, I personally will not just focus time will be me on my catching up on Slack messages or maybe looking at my phone for whatever else I need to look at. But if you actually put an hour in your calendar every single day, like you just said, and every hour is accounted for, saying building, I don't know, a playbook for renewals or saying reviewing health score metrics or whatever it is that you're trying to do to be more proactive, if you actually make it and treat it like a meeting, you'd be surprised at how much more you can shift towards that proactive nature. So I do love you sharing that juicy tip. And I completely agree. You have to be accountable and you have to hold yourself accountable.
Because otherwise the day will just take you like the sea,
Definitely.
If you don't do that for yourself, you're in it and you're going. And the reason that I say 1 to 2, I try to get people to do 2, but everything is baby steps. Because you're still going to have to deal with all that stuff, right? There's still going to be all the reactive things that you need to deal with. This is a realistic way. It's like, I'm not going from, eating burgers and fries every day to like gluten-free vegan overnight, because that's just not realistic. But, maybe I can have an apple with my Big Mac, So to me, and no, I don't, whatever. To me, saying like 1 hour towards the beginning of the day, my personal thing is check your email for half an hour because you're going to anyway. I'm never going to tell you, no, don't look at your email first thing in the morning. Sure, that would be great. Not going to happen. But like, do what you can do in a half an hour, shut it, know you're coming back to it in an hour. And then before the day steals you, 9:30 to 10:30, get in there, get it done. But also, you always want to know what is the very next step. So leave a breadcrumb for yourself. Like, I'm picking up here and tomorrow I'm going to do this. Because all the task switching, it actually, here's the psychology stuff, but it makes your IQ points drop by about 20% towards the end of the day by just going back and forth.
I'm just thinking it makes me exhausted because whenever I switch, I'm like, it's super tiring when you have to context switch so much in one day.
So, I mean, if you can batch all your, like, I'm going to be working with people and I'm going to be talking to you on meetings, and then I'm going to be working on like analytical stuff. If you can sort of batch those in different spaces in the day or on different days, that's ideal because you're going to end up less tired.
I love that. Those are such great tips. And I think as a leader, you have to start to set the example in order to get your team to follow suit, like you just said. But is there a strategy or a mindset a team leader should be following in order to be proactive, or more proactive, I should say, rather than reactive? Because I think, again, leaders are probably the worst at this, and then their teams see it, and then their teams mimic what they see as well.
They're never taught. When you move from a CSM to any sort of leadership position, again, one of the reasons I did this is there's almost never any training. And it's a completely different position and mindset. You go from being in the weeds to having to have a strategic overview, and it won't work. And that's why I hate player coach, because you can't do both. You just won't. It won't happen. You're basically paying someone more to continue to be a CSM and just be more stressed about it. One of the things that I say that you have to learn to do is just relentlessly prioritize and be okay with saying no. You have to learn how to do that in a way that doesn't piss people off. You are now responsible for this department's metrics and the people involved. So another thing I have people do is because a lot of this is very tactical and practical, because the brain is going to say, you're going to say here, that's a great idea. I'm going to do that. I'm going to block an hour on my calendar. We come back the next week. I say, great. How many people blocked an hour on their calendar? Lots of hands go up. How many took it? Maybe 2. I'm like, okay. So this is why we have the coaching. What happened? What did your brain tell you was more important?
Yeah, definitely. But I think you just highlighted something so important, is that we tend not to say no. And I think the way our minds are built as customer success professionals is, I'm here to help. I'm here to do it. I can do it all. Please let me help. Yes, I can help. Or yes, I'm happy to. Yes, we are. We're people pleasers naturally. And I think it's just the way we are. But I know a lot of CS pros that are always trying to do it all, and they're trying to help make their customers successful while also trying to collect feedback for product, while also trying to be like the best top performer, and, also have a seat at the executive table. And then eventually you burn out because that's just way too much on one person's plate. How do you either coach, or what's the psychological shift around finding balance around that?
That's about setting expectations. And this is something where I find it helps if you are creating like a visual cue of everything that's on your plate. I have a system that I give people, but basically it just is a way to track all the things that you have to do, all like the random crap, because there is a lot of that and it'll take up your whole day, plus a separate place for the projects. And just kind of map in your day, like realistically, historically, what have I been able to do in a day? What have I accomplished? You can track it for a few days, but you'll start to see, I like to have a to-do and a today, and you pull things from to-do into today. But you'll start to see that to-do just keeps growing longer and longer and longer, and you'll start to get stressed out about it. But the thing is, what it's time to do when that happens is say, reality intrudes. There is more on my plate than I can get done in the amount of time allotted, right? And it can feel like a scary conversation to say to your boss, to another department, like, I can't do this. Like, I have to say no. There are ways to say no without pissing people off. You can't be like, I can't, I'm sorry, or being really apologetic. It's just, if you treat it like math, if you're like, look, this is how many things I have to do. This is how many hours I have in the day. And I'm trying to put 10 pounds of potatoes into a 5-pound bag, is how I like to put it. It's just not going to fit. So you have to decide, what are the things that are going to truly move the needle on whatever your KPIs are. If it's NRR, if it's, QBRs, if, some people track how many QBRs, if it's engagement, whatever you are tracking, I prefer outcomes, but those are trickier to track. But what are the most bang for the buck activities? And what are the things that are on your plate that are actually going to make a difference? There's something called the Pareto principle, and it's in science, it's in math. It shows that 80% of your results will come from 20% of your actions. And taking the time to really dig into, what are those 20%? And instead of trying to fix the 80% that's not actually helping, double down on the stuff that is. And that's really how you work in the whole, do more with less thing. Do more with less is not possible if you just mean do all the stuff everyone was doing, but with fewer people.
That's just not possible. No.
You have to change your strategy and actually make progress. And that's what you have to do as a leader. It's prioritization all the time and saying, I would love to do this. I understand how important it is. But, we agreed that this was going to be, NRR was going to be our key priority. And that's a lagging indicator. But I can tell you that these are the things I need to do to get customers staying and to get customers buying more.
It's so important to remember that you are putting out output that is actually driving value, and the prioritization piece is so critical. I mean, as someone who works with CSMs as well, CSMs prioritize every day. If you think about it, you're prioritizing which customers have to call, which ones are priority, are they higher paying, are they lower health score, whatever it is. It's the same thing as a leader as well. It's the same skill set, I should say. It's like, you really do have to prioritize. If you have 50 things on your to-do list, how are you realistically going to get to those 50 things? It's not by doing more. You're not. You really have to prioritize, and you have to think about, of these 50 things on my to-do list, which one is going to drive the biggest impact for the business, for the team, for my customers. And like you said, it's only about 20% of those tasks that are actually going to drive impact. And you have to pick that out and decide as a leader what that means for you and your team. But I love that. So many good little tips here. I'm really loving this conversation. But I want to talk about something that I think as people pleasers and as top performers, CSMs also struggle with, or any CS professional, I should say, which is imposter syndrome. I know you talk about this on your podcast as well. I know it's something that honestly, I felt for 15 years now, and I know that I struggle with it. I know a lot of customer success professionals struggle with it. How do you address this with your coachees or with anyone you've worked with? How do you really shift that mindset when it comes to imposter syndrome?
This is one of my favorite things to talk about because it's something that you can actually shift in a reasonably short amount of time.
Tell us more. Tell us the quick trip.
I mean, but let's be honest, you're not going to build and scale your entire CS department in 3 months, right? So people come out of my program and they're like, I have all the tools that to do what I need to do. I know what I need to do now. It's not done, but I feel comfortable in that. The major difference they come out with is confidence because they're like, I'm a different person. Like, I'm not worried the way I was that like, oh my God, everyone's going to realize I'm a fraud. Oh my God, I'm going to get fired. I'm going to end up living under a bridge. And oh my God, and that's what I used to do. It's a combination of factors. To me, it's understanding that the people that you're talking to most of the time, if you're talking to other departments, if you're talking to senior leadership, they know less than you do about customer success.
So true. So true. You are the expert here.
Yeah, you're the expert here. And you have to be. And you have to be. If you let doubt get in there and you're like, well, I don't know. We are animals. When we look for a leader, it's because they seem like, okay, they know where they're going. I'm going to follow them because that's going to keep me safe. If a leader is like, well, I don't know, like you're not going to follow them because you're like, that doesn't seem safe to me. Right. So you have to also understand it's just the expectations, I think, are a little too high people have of what leadership really is. We're still just a bunch of grownups in a room having conversations, doing our best guess of what's going to work here. All right. That is all it is. If it's a strategic initiative, it's, all right, so this is what's been happening with onboarding. We're going to try doing, a group onboarding to use less of our time. We're going to see if that has any impact on adoption and the quality goes down. But if it doesn't, that's a real big win for us. So that's what we're going to do. It could increase our capacity by, take 20% more clients each. Okay, so you've called a number, which is what a lot of us are afraid to do. Guess what? If it ends up being 15%, no one's going to throw tomatoes at you or shoot you. You say these things in a room full of other executives and they just say, okay, sounds good. Moving on to the next. We all just kind of sense check each other so that if there's a glaring thing that's missing, because we all have blind spots, if there's something glaring, we can be like, hey, have you thought about this one angle? But otherwise, it's just like, hey, folks, here's what I'm going to try. I'm doing these little experiments. Off we go. And if it bombs miserably, you come back and you say, hey, so here's what we planned. We all agreed that made sense. Here's what happened. We did not have access to this data that, this is new data. We're going to pivot and here's how we're going to react based on the result we got. That's science, It's different if you're in a company where there are people who are abusive. And
that's not a healthy place to be.
Right. That's not about imposter syndrome. That's about someone being horrible. But it's a combination of, understanding that you don't have to know everything and what you know is enough. Just keep learning. And, you're still going to fall on your butt a couple of times and it's not going to be the end of the world.
Definitely. And I think if you're facing imposter syndrome, it means you're actually a super top performer. Right. So you shouldn't be worried.
Overconfident people do not have imposter syndrome. Like I've had bosses tell me like, I need you to mess up more often. I need you to take some risks. It's okay if you fail. Like just don't try and make it perfect because it's the perfectionist, aspect that comes into it. And it's like, if I don't make it perfect, if I make it perfect, then nobody can have anything to say about it. And no one can be mad at me and no one can be mean to me. Right. But the other piece of it, which I hadn't really thought about until I ended up having people in a cohort environment, is seeing that other people felt exactly the same way and seeing how knowledgeable they were and realizing they knew just about the same amount of stuff and that everybody was kind of in the same boat. That it's just like, okay, so this isn't a me issue. This is just kind of normal and everyone feels this way.
Yeah, it really is. And I think that everyone should start to embrace that. Like, truly, if you are a top performer and you're worried about like how you're being perceived or what's happening in your career, or if you're doing enough, or do you really belong in this role or this title, if you're thinking those things, then honestly, like, you're doing fine, because imposter syndrome doesn't happen to people who are like low performers or people who are like too confident. It happens to the people that are just doing the best they can and they're questioning themselves. And honestly, most of us are facing it.
And I'd say especially in CS right now because of all we've been facing and, being asked to do more than is possible. And now it's like, hey, you can save the economy, right? Right.
Yeah, you can save our whole business today,
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Yes,
you're going to be the entire growth engine. We haven't let you do anything before, but now you've got it, right? We've given you no tools, 2 people, a spreadsheet, and you can turn it around. Yeah, that's what you've been here for the whole time. So with those kind of expectations, of course, that's going to play into, oh my God, why can't I do this thing that they're asking me to do?
Yeah.
And when so many startups hire people who are first-time leaders, you have the blind leading the blind. And it happens enough because that's what they can afford, But it sets everybody up for a lot of frustration, a lot of disappointment, because it's a longer term growth strategy. But the other thing is CS people, as you've said, people pleasers, high performers. Most of us have been like that gold star A student, I do everything right and I work my butt off to get it, but I do it. For the first time in our lives, a lot of us are experiencing, I couldn't get the outcome that I wanted. And that is devastating. And we're not getting the praise that we're used to. And we're not getting the, oh my God, you were such a help. And there are people looking at us with disappointment. And that is devastating. And it really affects a lot of us in terms of our mental health. And the reality is so many of those people are being set up to fail. So it's not just getting the confidence to get over imposter syndrome. It's getting the confidence to be able to step back, pause, look at it logically and say, all right, what am I being asked to do? How would that get done? And is that truly possible? And then having those conversations, even if it's not a conversation that people are going to like, being able to say, I want to do this for you, but you're asking me to build a house in 2 weeks.
Yeah, which is impossible. And that is not a task that you should be feeling bad about or have any sort of imposter syndrome around, to be honest.
Yeah, more mature companies hopefully don't do that as much, but it's happening a lot in startups right now. So I do like to call it out.
It is. And you've just talked about a lot of things about mindset shift, about imposter syndrome, about how you can get certain outputs from your team based on your leadership style and the way that you lead your teams. Looking back at your career and everything that you've accomplished, what's one thing that you wish you could have done differently or better based on mindset?
Wow, there are so many things. I mean, the first and most obvious is like, I wish I could have been a little nicer to myself and not, had such an almost identity crisis when I couldn't do something.
You shifted
perfectly.
Careers like massively.
Oh yeah. I mean, honestly, that was so much easier than CS ever was. There's so many fewer people to have to try and make happy. I enjoy learning, but in terms of like what I would have done differently, there are certain jobs where I would have said no to certain things that I said yes to and I shot myself in the foot. And it really wasn't anyone's fault. But I would have just been like, oh, you know what? That's not possible right now. This is what we need to focus on. And like what you're asking me to do here isn't reasonable. Rather than just being like, yeah, I can do it and like falling on my face.
Yeah. Learning to say no and learning to set your boundaries. I think that's a huge mindset tip that anyone can take away in CS, whether you're a first-time CSM or a seasoned leader? I know I struggle with it still. It's something that you have to always find balance with. So thanks for sharing that. Listen, Rachel, we can sit here and talk for hours. And I honestly, we could probably record like 10 podcasts on this topic, but I always like to wrap up my podcast episodes with a quick fire round where I challenge my guests to try to answer the next few questions in one sentence or less, which might be tough based on what we've talked about.
Based on me. Yeah.
Yes, but I'm going to challenge you to try to answer these in one sentence or less. Are you ready?
Ready.
Okay. The first is, if you could predict the future, what do you think CS will focus on next year?
Outcomes. I'm seeing it all over. The first dominoes are starting to tip. I think it's going to be outcomes, and I'm happy about that because that's a sentence.
Good first attempt. Next question is, which app or software do you use every day, every week on your phone or your laptop, and why?
Aside from games, I play so many phone games, it's so embarrassing. But I actually use Trello all the time because that's where I keep my organizational system, everything I have to do, everything I have to tell everyone. I cannot keep a thought in my brain. It's all in there.
Amazing. I love a good to-do list as well. And the next question is, if you could change one thing about customer success, what would it be?
Make people have realistic expectations.
I like that.
So hard to do one sentence on that, but that's where I'm going to leave it. Yeah.
Okay. Amazing. And my last question for you is, who should be my next podcast guest?
I want to give you like 10.
It's okay. You can give me 10.
Yeah. I would say Cynthia Da Silva, Shari, if she's allowed, Shari Srebnick, depending if Forrester lets her. Jan Young always has amazing things to say about revenue and CS, really a cool, different perspective.
Yep.
Those are all really good people to talk to, I would say.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time, Rachel. I really appreciated this conversation. It was super enlightening. I always love chatting with you. If our guests have any future questions or want to hear more about CSLA or everything that you're up to, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
You can find me on provansuccess.com. Provan, not proven, but it's a pun. Provansuccess.com. And I also am on LinkedIn all the time. You can find me there. I am not scary at all. You can always just message me and I'll be nice to you, I promise.
Amazing. And I'll make sure to link everything in our show notes. Thank you so much, Rachel. Really appreciate it. And thanks for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. This was a blast.
Thank you for listening to the Customer Success Pro podcast today. I hope you learned something new to take back to your team and your company. If you enjoyed today's episode, please can you take 1 minute to give me a positive review on Apple Podcasts? It takes a lot of time and energy to create an episode, and I want to continue to create more for you. But it would be great to know that you are enjoying these episodes. Also, do not forget to subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcast, as I release a new podcast every month. And if you have any topics that you would like me to discuss in the future, or you would like to be a guest on this podcast, please feel free to reach out. All my contact details are in the show notes. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to share it, because sharing is caring. Thanks again for listening, and tune in next time for more on customer success. Cheers to your CS journey, and catch you next time.